blood bank is one class that you may have noticed is a little bit different than all of our other classes. And that when you are in the lab, what's the first thing you do at the beginning of every lab? QC, right? Urinalysis, boom, we learn QC. Hematology, you run your QC. Everything we do, we have to run QC. But you'll notice I have never had you do QC in blood bank. The reason is, in order to get to the point of being able to do QC, you have to be far enough along in the class to understand a lot more than positive, negative, or this value, or whatever. So we can't have you do it. The other problem is QC takes about 40 minutes to run QC in blood bank. Once you get faster and better, it's going to be, 25, 30. But when you're first starting, it's going to take probably more than 40. But like right now, you guys could probably sit down and do it in 40, 45 minutes. But that means taking 40 or 45 minutes out of my labs. Or adding another hour to the already 4-hour lab, which I don't think anybody here wants to do, right? So we don't have you guys actually do QC in blood bank because of things like that. When you do your workshop, before you go to clinicals, we'll have you do QC. We'll have you go through the process. When you're out in clinicals, you will do first thing in the morning, first thing you do is QC or X. You do all QC. But we don't have you actually do it in the course during the course. So, blood bank, now you understand a lot more about blood bank, the basics of all, but we're going to talk about some of the different regulations and standards. And we're going to talk about all these guys here. Blood bank is one of the most regulated of all of the departments because we have a product we're giving as well as testing we're doing. So, heavily regulated because, well, I just said, we're doing testing and we're giving a product, right? So because we're giving a product, we must adhere to good manufacturing guidelines also. So not just SOPs, but good manufacturing practices. This is a term borrowed from industry, from manufacturing, to describe standards of quality a product must meet. So we talk about good manufacturing. Blood banks are subject to inspection by a lot of different regulatory organizations. Usually it's CAP or CLIA inspected, but blood bank also has other things that we get inspected with. A lot of times we don't get the general CAP inspections and CLIA inspections because we're inspected elsewhere, and they leave it to those groups because it is such a specialized area within the lab. Inspections are done unannounced, and so you have to always be ready for them. You always just have to be ready for an inspection. Pretty much what we are doing for you along the way is preparing you so you're always ready. People always get nervous when inspectors come. I get nervous when our accreditors come. We get them every 10 years. I get nervous, but I know we have a good program. And I know our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. And I know I can show them all the things that we meet. We meet all of the different standards. Here's all of them. But I still get nervous, right? Because you're being looked at. We are preparing you to always be ready also. We are preparing you to always be ready to go. Somebody comes in your lab to inspect you. You're not doing shortcuts. You're not going to skip QC. You're not going to do anything that's going to cause you to get into trouble come time for an inspection. So some of the regulatory agencies, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration is involved in the blood bank because now we have a product, a human biological product that we're actually putting into other humans. So the FDA is involved. OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, they're involved in all the labs. Are we providing you with PPE? Are we providing you with sinks to wash your hands? Is it safe? CAP, College of American Pathologists. CLIA, Clinical Lab Improvement Act. These are the two that most hospital labs get regularly inspected by. JCAHO, Joint Commission on Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations, they're hospital-wide. JCAHO is a hospital-wide accreditation. Okay? Usually when JCAHO comes in, they're going to walk through the lab and just wave on their way by because they know that we are so heavily inspected. That's not their forte, right? That's not their specialty area. Their specialty area is in the lab because we have these other areas that are specialty for the lab. And then the AABB, the American Association of Blood Banks. This is the big one that most blood banks are accredited by. If you're AABB accredited, most of the other organizations are going to say, that's good, they hold the gold standard on blood banks. We know if you're accredited by them, you're good to go. So, FDA. FDA only regulates blood banks, no other labs, because we have a product. Blood is considered a drug, so we have to follow their guidelines. Donor centers come under closer scrutiny than transfusion centers. So the American Red Cross, the Impact Life, they just changed from Mississippi Valley to Impact Life. You know, all these donor centers, because they're doing the collections, are we collecting it safely? Are we following the guidelines? Are we checking the donors, making sure they match the standards, things like that. FDA must be notified in cases of transfusion death. Any transfusion death, whether preventable or not, has to go to the FDA. FDA also must be notified of any biological product deviation. So, blood shipped or stored at the wrong temperature. If you get blood that's been sitting on a truck for 4 days and the ice packs are melted and it's hot, that's a problem, right? Blood transfused that did not meet the patient's special requirements. They ordered leukoreduced, CMV negative, irradiated, and we gave regular straight old blood. Blood transfused to the wrong patient, whether it resulted in a death or not. If I have, you know, 2 gyms and I give it to this one and not this one, it was meant for that one, they both were A positive, no harm, no foul, it still is an FDA regulation. And I'm kind of being tongue-in-cheek, no harm, no foul, right? You guys all know that, right? That, you know, that is a problem. I'm not saying it wasn't a problem. Blood cross-matched on an outdated sample. How many hours is a cross-match good for?
72.
72. So what if we pull that sample out 4 days later and cross-match it? You know, that's not going to work. OSHA governs all organization safety. You must have MSDS sheets in the lab. Do you know all of our labs have MSDS sheets? We pointed them out, but we point out a lot of things early on. We want to make sure you know that. So what Marcy and I did a couple years ago, we went through each lab and we did everything in that lab. So instead of having one massive one for all 4 of the labs, each lab has its own specific for what's in that lab. And it's actually divided for us by, do we use it in general, micro, heme, you know, what do we use it in to try to make it easier to find? Because, you know, there's so many different ways to file all that information. Personal protective equipment, by law, we have to provide you with safety glasses, gloves, coats, things like that. Bloodborne pathogen standards, the training. We have to train you every year. If you're on a traditional 2-year path, you get bloodborne pathogen training in basic lab skills, and again in chemistry. If you're on a 3-year path, that's when I sometimes have to smuggle you that safety test during your off year. Or if you took basic lab skills a year in advance and now you're coming in and you're just starting our program, but you've taken basic lab skills, I got to get you all these packets because you have to have annual safety training. Just like out in a facility, out in a hospital, you have to have annual safety training. So we make sure you guys get that here also. Needle Stick Safety and Prevention Act. We want to make sure that we are safe with needles. CAP. CAP usually regulates the entire laboratory. Every 2 years, you get regular inspections. They come in and just check things out. They utilize a traceability format. So what they do is they take a blood specimen, follow it from phlebotomy through the cross-matching, issuing, and transfusion. So they randomly pick a patient, and they look at every step along the way from the phlebotomy on. Who drew the blood? Were they trained? Can I see where they were checked off training on phlebotomy? You know, how long did it take to get processed? Who did the processing? Can I see where they were trained? How long did it sit in the blood bank? Who did the cross match? Let me see your QC for the day to show that your reagents all were working. Who was doing it? Let me see their education. Let me see their training records. So they follow it all the way through to make sure it was done correctly. Then they look at the transfusion piece of it. They actually go out, you know, what nurse gave it. Let me see where they signed off. Did they do all the correct vitals? They do all of that. They look at policies, procedures, and records checking at each step along the way, just like I talked about, every step. Were all policies followed? Personnel qualifications, continuing ed records. Not only, okay, I see they have their certification, have they maintained it? Have they done regular continuing eds, things like that? We're preparing you for that, right? That shouldn't be a problem. It's still gonna be stressful. I'm not saying it's not gonna be stressful. We're preparing you for it. Because these are things that we want you to know. If you have a question when you're doing something, where do you go? If you're, let's say you're doing a cross match in the lab and something just is off and you have a question, where do you go? Your SOPs first, right? Hold on your SOPs. That's why I give you guys the books, the lab manuals, because those are your SOPs. First place you have a question, go to your SOPs. It's not answered there, coworkers, lab managers, whatever. Don't guess. Never guess. Okay? That's really bad. I think I've made that clear a few times. I had a situation many years ago now, thankfully. We had a student at clinical who the donor had typed negative for the antigen that was causing the problem. And the tech working with the student said, well, that's wrong. They tested positive. They knew they'd given them a positive. Well, they went to look and they thought they had made up the results, which is a huge problem. You never make up results. If you don't have time, you leave it blank, right? You know, pass it on to the next person. If you have one of my exams, whatever, you don't make up a result, ever. So she got called in for cheating on her clinical lab practical. They were explaining what they did. The reagent, I'm gonna say E, I don't know what it was, but anti-E, for example, was out. So they used saline to make sure they got it all. They put saline in the tube and like swirled it like ketchup. Don't do that, okay? Not allowed. So that's what happened. They diluted it out so much that it looked negative because they didn't have enough antibody in the tube to do the reaction. So when in doubt, ask somebody, right? I think you guys have learned enough at this point not to do that. I kind of sat there flabbergasted, like, what? CLIA, labs must subscribe to this for Medicare reimbursement. You must subscribe and follow CLIA regulations. Usually though, CLIA is not going to be inspecting much if you're also CAP or ABB accredited, because why would they waste their time? They got two other organizations doing it, right? So they focus on what they need to do. It operates under the FDA standards and the CFR, which is the Code of Federal Regulations. So CLIA operates under federal law. JCAHO, like I said, whole hospital-wide. They come in, look at everything from a patient's rights and safety standpoint is how they're looking at all of it. Minimal inspection of the lab, also if AAB or CAP accredited. So as I said, they're gonna come in and wave on their way through, nice to see you, yep, you have a lab, check mark, because these guys are gonna be spending a lot more time going through all the detail in the lab. Joint Commission has sentinel events. You guys probably remember that from basic lab skills, right? Preventable occurrences that result in the death or disability of a patient. If you give the wrong blood type that ends up in a death, it's a JCAHO reportable event. Amputate the wrong body part. A baby goes missing from the hospital. Trying to think of, there's a whole list of them we talked about. Oh, there we go. Infant abductions, unexpected death of a full-term infant, severe neonatal jaundice, surgery on the wrong individual or the wrong body part, surgical instrument or object left at a patient after surgery or another procedure, rape in a continuous care setting, suicide in a continuous care setting or within 72 hours of discharge, hemolytic transfusion reaction due to blood group incompatibilities, and then radiation therapy to the wrong part. Those are just some of the JCAHO sentinel events. This is the one we're most worried about. AABB, Maintains AABB quality program. So any institution accredited by AABB must submit a quality plan. They must have something in place and submit it on a regular basis, at annual or biannual, I can't remember exactly. Takes apart and examines every aspect of the transfusion service. So remember when I say your reagents must be in the same places in the reagent holders? That's part of the plan. Your tubes, all in the same order, part of the plan. All these little tiny things that all help contribute to the safety of the patient. That is what we consider the quality system essentials, like the system along the way. How do we make sure that this patient is safe from here to there? What steps can we take? Read one tube, write one tube. All those things we do to make sure there's no mistakes done along the way. So, quality system essentials, organization. We must organize things. Keep them all organized the same way. Resources. Equipment. Supplier and customer issues. Process control, documents and records. Deviation, non-conformances and complications, assessments, internal and external assessments, process improvement, and facilities and safety. All of these are quality system essentials. To make sure that we are giving quality results and quality product to patients, these are what we're going to be doing. So, quality control, testing and monitoring routinely performed to ensure proper functioning of reagents, equipment, and methods. We run quality control and hematology before our patients to make sure that they're coming up with the right numbers. Quality assurance, a system that governs every aspect of the blood bank. They look for root causes of problems. Well, I like my rack this way, and Jim likes it that way, and now I got his rack, and it's not in order, and I put the wrong things in the wrong tubes, and my results are wrong. Okay. Stresses error prevention approach, and utilizes process control to eliminate errors. So those are the things that are involved in the quality assurance programs in a blood bank. So process control, setting up the policy or procedure to minimize errors. Examples of process control, personnel. We have to have adequate staff. They have to be well trained. We have to have competencies documented. We have to know that these are people that can do the job. We're not pulling somebody off the street to do these. Validations. Any new equipment is monitored and testing before being put into place. You can't say, oh good, here's the new Sysmex, we'll get rid of the old, here's the new, and start testing. You have to run them side by side and validate the instrument before you can run it. Quality monitors, periodic checks and procedures to see if they are done properly. Proper documentation of blood being issued. Proper use, documentation of controls. Things like that. That's all part of quality monitoring. Process control also goes into the blood utilization piece of this. So blood banks must have a way to monitor blood component therapy. So what they do is they have oftentimes somebody that's kind of overseeing it all, and they monitor physician usage, make sure are the physicians ordering the right things, the right amounts, is it appropriate? You know, if we're running a blood transfusion on someone with a hemoglobin of 11, shouldn't be doing that, right? So what is that cutoff? And so there's things set up, and actually the computer systems now kind of help guide the doctors to make sure they're heading the right way. Appropriate blood utilization. So are they ordering it right? Are we using it right? Reporting transfusion reactions. Reporting transfusion transmitted diseases. So there have to be systems in place for all of that to monitor it and try to find out if these things happen, how can we have prevented it, and how can we change things in the future to be better. So a deviation is any occurrence or event that does not meet the standards. It's considered a deviation. Usually reportable to JCAHO or the FDA. Blood bank deviations are reportable to either or. They're analyzed, like I just said in the last slide. We want to look at them. Any deviation, what happened, how did it happen, what is the root cause that made it happen? Are we understaffed and somebody had 4 patients in one rack because they were so far behind and tubes got messed up? Was somebody that was not signed off on something doing it? who did the draw? Maybe it was a missed patient out on the floor. You know, we gotta figure out what was the root cause, how do we fix it? Years and years ago, 70% of all lab errors were pre-analytical, meaning usually happening on the phlebotomy side. They drew the wrong patient, they drew the wrong tubes, they mislabeled the patients, they didn't label the patient tubes, things like that. We've really gotten a lot better because, as you guys went through phlebotomy class, you saw all the different steps we take now. We've gotten a lot better with that, but that's still sometimes an error. We need to find out. When we found out those were the errors that was happening, how do we prevent them? We tweak our procedures to make our procedures not have those problems. So process control, we apply it to prevent any deviations. So quality control of the reagents, we have to undergo QC. Like I said, normally at the very beginning of a lab, we do the QC. Blood bank, we can't because there's so much involved in it. We reagent lot comparison upon the receipt to ensure the new lot reactivity matches the current lot in place. So we have to compare lots for a period of time. Daily QC, routine reagents that are used daily are QC daily. Those are our ABO reagents, our screen cells, and our Coombs serum. Those that we do not use routinely get done days of use. For example, special antigen typing. You guys run your QC on antigen typing when you do your antigen types. How often do you think we have to antigen type in the real lab? Not very often. And so we're not going to waste every day. I'm not going to take my anti-big K, anti-little k, anti-Lewis A, anti-Lewis B, M, N, S, S, Duffy A, Duffy B, E, C, C, D, you know. I'm not going to take all of them and QC them every day. I'll be wasting all my reagent on QC. So the day we use them is the day that we're actually going to QC them.
And that's the positive and negative controls that we already do
Yep.
in class.
Yep, it's exactly. That's what we do. So we'll do those on days of use. We have to keep records with documentation of any corrective action if necessary and periodic supervisory review. Your supervisor has to look at your QC, look at the records, make sure it looks okay, make sure everything's looking right. As the employee doing it, if something doesn't look right, your gut instinct is automatically to repeat it, right? That's what you do. Like, wait, something didn't happen right. You're not just going to record it and send it out. You have to fix it at the time. Here is an example of a QC record, and of course, you can't see this from where you're at, but that's okay. This is the one that I made up for our lab. So you can see what we do is we have anti-A with A1 cells at immediate spin. We expect a 30 to 4 plus. And anti-A with B cells, immediate spin, we expect it to be a negative, right? These are very basic. B with A1 cells, B with B cells, AB with A1 cells, AB with A cells. So you can see I've got a reagent and a cell, and I'm testing it all together. And then you have your date, and you can put all your reagents in there. Down here, we keep our manufacturers and all that information, just like we've done before with QC. Our anti-A, who's our manufacturer, what lot number are we at, and what's the expiration date. Anti-B, AB, A1 cells, B cells, D, RH control, screen cells, PEG, AHG, check cells. So then at the very end, you can see, is the rack satisfactory to use? So if they all match what they're supposed to be, the answer there is yes. Ready to use, ready to start my day. Equipment, once again, 2 levels of equipment. Any new equipment, we have to thoroughly check it out, validate it, make sure it works the same as the old, because if it doesn't work the same, can we really compare these results and these results? If there's differences, we need to make sure it switches smoothly. Equipment that gets used daily gets monitored daily. The refrigerators, you guys have all done lab manager duties, right? The refrigerators, you have to check and make sure when you write the results down of what the temperature is, did it fall within the criteria? Those heat blocks, I told you, we don't actually keep written logs of it, but every day in a real lab, you will keep a written log of your heat block. But I told you, you also, every time you put it in, are going to double check it. That's just that extra check that falls in place with that. Functional checks performed periodically. Centrifuges. There's actually ways to QC your centrifuge to make sure it's working right. And depending on where you're at, I can't remember if it's monthly or every other month that you have to do that. But you have to make sure that it's spinning at the right speed and it's getting the right button size. All those times that we have for our Sero 1, Sero 2, and Sero 3, that's based on how well they function while QCing them. Refrigerators also are equipped, real blood bank refrigerators are all equipped with alarms to signal the temperature going out of range. You have to check the alarm function periodically. So you're gonna be pushing the test button, make sure it's functioning. It's equipped with a recording chart. The recording charts, we actually have those on ours. You've seen the little circles. Provides continuous documentation that blood products were stored at a proper temperature. And then the temperature gets checked and recorded manually every 8 hours if no recording chart. So we have the recording chart and we check it once a day to make sure the recording chart matches the temperature it says it is. And we also have the high and the low for the 24 hours. That's pretty common because we need to know how warm did it get during that time. We don't change our paper on our dials every day or every week. I can't remember how often it's supposed to change. Because of that, that's why we have our high and low. If you are not a 24-hour lab, your alarm has to alarm someplace that is monitored 24 hours a day. You know, if you are an 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. lab and your alarm goes off at 10 o'clock at night, somebody needs to be notified that the alarm is going off. You can't just have it in a nice, like if ours goes off in the middle of the night, no one's gonna know. We don't store blood. We don't give blood, so it's, we don't have to, but think about that, you have to if you have blood. Centrifuges, speed and timer checked quarterly, there's the answer, I couldn't remember. Speed should be in the 3,400 RPM range, timer tested with a stopwatch. And then this is the functional calibration we do once a year, optimal spin time for various test results. So that's where we got our 1.5 minutes for washes and our, is it 20 seconds? Our Sera 1 is 20 seconds, right? 20 seconds for Sera 1. Our old centrifuges, they were all different. Some were 15, some were 25, some were 2-minute washes, some were 3-minute washes, some were minute. It was all over the board. The new centrifuges are a lot more standard. Heat blocks, water blocks, recorded daily. Good process control means you check it each time. And then the other thing is you want to move your thermometers around. You don't always want to test this one back here because if he does this one here, what's this one over here doing? Right? So you want to make sure that they're all standard because what if half of the heat block's not heating and you don't know it, you're not catching it. QC thermometers are specialized thermometers, liquid and glass. They get tested annually against the NIST certified thermometer. If they're electronic, they get tested monthly, and we do not recommend mercury thermometers anymore in the lab. So these specialized thermometers get tested on a regular basis to make sure they're right, and we test all of our equipment against those. Documents and records, policies, processes, procedures, supporting documents. You've heard me say, if it's not documented, it wasn't done, right? It's so much paperwork, but the reason is because it all falls to somebody's safety. Describes how specific, within the documents, your policies must describe how specific specimens will be handled. So you have a policy on a massive transfusion. Policies on neonatal transfusions. Can you give an entire unit, 500 cc unit of blood to a neonate? The answer is no, right? So you have to have a policy. How do I safely put this in PD bags and transfuse it? Where do I put the hematocrit? How do I determine this? Policy on switching blood types. Policy on emergency release. Everything must have a policy. So like we just went through that massive transfusion protocol, we have to have a policy on what that looks like in a lab. Like, okay, can I switch to, RH, what do I do? How do I do this? How do I handle it? You have to have processes. Describe the operation flow of the lab. Who's responsible for what? Hiring process, training process. Like who can be hired? Can I just hire anybody off the street to come work in blood bank? No. What does training look like? You're all almost done with the class. Can I just throw you in and start working? No. You've got to go through quite a training process. Equipment validation. How do I do it? When does it get done? Who does it? Computer validation process. If you have a computer system for computer cross matches, how do you validate that? Descriptions or process for handling and storing and distributing blood. What is the process? I talk about somebody coming to the door and us checking it all, but there's actually ways people do that now by a tube system. So blood does get sent by tube on a fairly regular basis now, which always just still as an old-time blood banker makes me go, but it's fine. It's fine. No, it is fine. It just, as an old-time blood banker, it just always gives me the, ugh. Procedures, guidelines and directions for all testing done in the lab. Your SOPs, you have every test you do in the lab will be written up how to do it. That's why I said you always go to your SOPs first. This is why I always let you use lab manuals for all your exams with me. Because in the real world, you will always have an SOP. You never have to memorize anything. Now at this point, how many people, and obviously you don't have to raise your hand, but is anybody here still looking up the procedure of how to make a 3% wash suspension every time they make one? Remember week 1, how long that took you to make a 3% wash suspension? Okay, we don't have to look it up, but something comes in the lab that seems to go off. I wonder if the SOPs have a what if section, right? Most of my SOPs, you know, have like an introduction, why we do the test, and they have all the interpretation and notes following. Those are good places to look if something doesn't quite look right or seems a little off. So that's the procedure manual, SOPs. All written procedures should be written in a standard format and referencing the proper sources. So you know, in my lab manuals, they all follow a very similar format. Because if they all look different, it's going to be hard for anybody to learn from them all. So it's really important that within a lab, they all are built the same. SOP must be available to the staff on site where the work is performed. Does you no good to have an SOP in a main lab someplace way away if you're working right here. A lot of places have gone paperless, so it's all on computers. I'm a paper girl, so I love my little post-it notes, one line after the other line. But computers are how things are. Computer outages, sometimes there's been problems. There have been a few where computers go out and the SOPs are on the computer and now they're kind of stuck.
Are you mandated to have a paper backup in case that happens?
Nope.
That's weird.
Yeah. That's my opinion, but I'm not, you know, I'm a paper person.
I know the UW does, but
Yeah, a lot of places do because computers go down.
Yeah.
You know, especially my favorite middle of the night computer maintenance because, you know, no one's doing anything on the computers in the middle of the night. So supporting documents provides documentation of work completed, worksheets, antibody ID panels, special antigen typing, cross-match record, pretty much all those things you guys staple together for me every week in lab, all that gets saved, so it's all on the computer now. Panels are still by paper. And the way I teach you to do panels is the way they're doing panels in the real world. Okay? Who here works, somebody works in blood bank in this group, who is it? Levi?
Yes.
Are panels done on paper?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do.
Okay, just, I haven't checked for a year, you know, but yeah, they're done, I mean, they're done the way I teach them, right? Except maybe 3 instead of 2 or different rollouts,
Yeah. I only see like a couple of times.
but they pull out paper. But now what do we do with that paper? We gotta keep it, because it's now part of the patient record. Forms, transfusion slips, blood transfer forms, blood ordering forms, request forms, etc. All forms and worksheets must be kept in a master file. So when they come, they can say, can I see this form? Here it is. Can I see this form? Here it is. So you have to have a master file of all your forms. Again, some of them may be a master file online now, the way they do things, but you know, when they come in, they need to make sure they're all the same, and we're all filling them out the same. So in blood bank, quality is a primary goal. Because without quality, people die, and that's bad. When you're dispensing blood products, it's mandatory that you are following quality procedures, quality guidelines, you're following the rules, you're crossing your T's, dotting your I's, all that stuff. Blood banks have to answer to a lot of different regulatory agencies. A blood bank's quality plan analyzes every step of each of its processes and procedures to ensure that quality goals are being met each step of the way.